That. Good. Start the timer. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Aerospace Medicine Residency Grand Rounds. And before we get going, I want to remind you that we have several off-site groups that have tuned in today. So when we get to the end of the program, we'll offer questions to them first because we'll need a microphone for them to hear the questions. But anyway, this morning we are honored to have Chris Haas with us. He's going to speak to us about some experiences he has had recently. So that we can get going, I'll go ahead and introduce him. So Chris Haas is a senior resident in our program. He has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Colorado in Aerospace Engineering. He actually worked for Raytheon for a while. And he also completed an internal medicine residency program at Baylor College of Medicine, and one of his interests there was genomics and human genes, which is very interesting from the standpoint of space travel, as we know. And in addition, he has been a member of ASMA. He had an honorable mention for Young Investigator Award from our program. He was awarded the William K. Douglas Award last year, back in June, and has done a very good job in a residency program. And he just completed research rotation at the German Space Agency and with ESA. So with that, I'm not going to use up any more of his time. And Chris, thanks a lot. All right, testing. Got it, okay.
All right, good morning, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming in today. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about my summer. This was last summer in Cologne, Germany. I had the opportunity to spend some time at the German Aerospace Center and European Space Agency. So I have no financial relationships to disclose and no off-label or investigational use. So where this journey began for me. So I had a thought that it'd be nice to see if we could expand our rotations abroad. And for myself, there was a logical starting point in Europe. My dad was born in Austria. And my grandparents also lived in Cologne in the 1960s, which actually I didn't know until I set this rotation up. And my dad said, "Oh yeah, my dad used to live there." And I said, "Oh, okay." So it was my dad's father, as well as my grandmother and aunt lived in Cologne. And currently now I have some family in Switzerland as well. So I was at the asthma conference in 2017, and I was talking to Dr. Karina Marshall-Goebel about her experiences at the DLR, and asked whether she think there'd be any further opportunity for a resident or student to come out and work with the DLR, and she said, yes, of course. Here's Dr. Jorn Rittweger, and I just write to him, and he'll probably write you back, and that's what happened. I met with Dr. Rittweger when he came out for some studies with muscle that he was doing at NASA. It was an opportune time for us to meet in person. We set up the rotation, and then at the end of June last year, we headed out. So the DLR, the acronym, it stands for Deutschen Zentrums für Luft- und Raumfahrt, which basically it's just a little translation, means it's German Centers for Air and Space Travel, or the German Aerospace Center. The DLR facilities, they're in 20 plus locations throughout Germany, and it's not only Cologne that does space medicine work. There's a behavioral center up in Hamburg, for example. But DR Cologne supports several main focus areas, and just kind of like much of NASA, NASA DLR has multiple missions that aids the development in science and technology across Germany and beyond. And so Cologne supports three of these main missions: one, spaceflight operations support and research, transportation, both ground and aviation, and obviously space travel as well, and energy. The focus of my talk today is obviously on the Cologne DLR facility, and so for simplicity, I'm just going to refer to the campus DLR from here on out. Just to show you some of the missions that they have at Cologne, at the top left is a solar furnace. So there's a big mirror that collects and concentrates the sunlight and sends a beam into this building. And they can use that solar beam to reach temperatures above 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. In the bottom right is a cryogenic wind tunnel that's also on the campus, and they use that mainly for transportation research, looking at aerodynamic flow over trains, for example. So in a moment, I'll describe the space medicine research efforts in Cologne, but beforehand, I'd also like to provide you with just a little bit of an overview of the geography of the region. So Cologne is in the northwestern part of Germany. It's most closely located to Brussels and Amsterdam. They are a few hours, 3 to 4 hours away by train. Frankfurt also is about 3-4 hours away. And then Munich down in the south is basically a day's worth of travel to get to. And then advancing the slide here. So here's a picture of where Cologne is situated again. And you can see that on the topographic map that it is basically where from the north there's flatlands that come down from the Baltic Sea, and right where it starts to get into somewhat of a hill country sits Cologne. Down the south on the river, the rolling hill country continues, and there are many castles that are found to the south along the Rhine River that flows through Cologne. The Moselle River Valley to the southwest is also a well-known wine region in Germany. This here on the left is Castle Eltz, and on the right is a shot from Trier, Germany, which is just at the end of the Moselle River Valley. And Trier is thought to be the oldest German settlement in Germany, and you can see some example of the Roman and Gothic architecture mixed together, which is kind of neat. Okay, and then from this map, you can see Cologne, and you can see the ring streets surrounding the old town of Cologne. And you can see the Rhine coursing by the center of the city, once again, and just adjacent to the Cologne airport in the southeast at the bottom right of the map is the DLR campus along with the ESA facility. So this map shows a layout of the DLR campus itself, and in the circle are the buildings for aerospace medicine, and the large rectangular building number 10 in that circle is the NVHAB facility, which I'll be speaking to you about. The campus, it's easily reached by local trains and bus or even biking, depending on where you are in Cologne, pretty bike-friendly city. And then nearly adjacent to the Aerospace Medicine Facility is the ESA European Astronaut Center, or EAC. And the EAC and ESA has the building from loan from the DLR campus. The campus itself, it's nicely wooded and it's pleasant to walk through. On the right side is a photo of my arrival at the Aerospace Medicine Institute on the first day. And these pictures show an outside photo of the Aerospace Medicine Institute. And the picture on the right is the office and desk that was provided to me for the duration of my rotation. So DLR has a large scope of research activities in support of space medicine research. The main area of expertise of my advisor, Dr. Rittberger, is in muscle. But as you can see here, they really do quite a bit. They look at muscle, bone, SANS research, hypobaric and hypoxic environments, which I'll speak of when we talk about NVHAB. They do space radiation environmental science, space microbiology, neuromuscular investigations, behavioral studies. One investigator looks at a mirror docking trainer, and he looks at repetition of doing mirror docking and learning through the program that they have. And then they also do sleep studies as well. This is a picture of the model of the Matryoshka experiment, which is a human-like radiation sensor that was used on ISS. The model is built, it's using a tissue and lung density equivalent to the human body and includes real bone, as you can see here on the right. It was flown on the exterior of the ISS in a metal case. You can just barely see the metal casing on the left in the left photo. And this is simulating an astronaut in an EVA suit so they could better understand some of the radiation doses that were coming into this phantom model. I had the opportunity to observe a microneurography study. Microneurography allows for the study of nerve transmission to muscle. A small needle sensor about the size of an acupuncture needle is inserted into the muscle, and the signal is then amplified and recorded. And there's the recording equipment on the right. It's pretty interesting. When the needle is in the muscle, you can shout into the air and you can see that the nerve impulse changes, because no matter how much you try to stay still, there's still a sympathetic response where the muscle will activate as it hears that loud noise, and you can see it on the monitor. So I also had the opportunity to go over to the Space Life Sciences Microbiology Laboratory while I was there. And shown here, this is a commercial clinostat. It simulates weightless conditions in a fluid by tumbling the samples to the secured platform. I really enjoyed getting the chance to see this in the lab, because I used to do clinostat studies in the Space Life Sciences lab during undergraduate training. Dr. Rittweger, as I had mentioned earlier, has expertise in the study of spaceflight effects on muscle. He also works at a children's hospital in Cologne on muscle rehab in the setting of muscular dystrophy. Similarly, this past summer, so I worked on a pilot study that had importance to terrestrial clinical applications and potential use in the analysis of muscle strength during spaceflight. That's where my pilot work came from over the summer. To talk to you just a little bit about my DLR project itself, this is the lab that I was working in. In the photo, the seat at the left is something where you can sit down, and we have some wheels that hold the leg in place in a certain position so that we can look at muscle strength. And there's a foot plate underneath the seat where you press on it, and there's a dynamometer, which can then measure the force that you're imparting onto that plate. There's two different ultrasounds in the picture, but the ultrasound that I used was the one on the right, the GE Logic. So we did a pilot study to analyze muscle stiffness, and the technology that we employed was ultrasound elastography. This method has yet to be extensively used with muscle. A lot of times, if you think of elastography, one of the main uses would be for patients with hepatitis. You can look at the stiffness of the liver with elastography. That would be one main use. And so what we did is we analyzed muscle stiffness before and after with use of a vibration plate. So elastography, it determines the stiffness properties of a tissue by propagating sound waves and looking at the frequency changes of the rebounding waves to determine the Young's modulus. And this is just a graphical depiction of Young's modulus. It's a comparison of if you're putting a stress on a body, force per area, and you're displacing that tissue, you're looking at the comparison of how much stress you've placed on it versus how much displacement the object then has, or strain. And it's a measure of stiffness. And so we have the subject standing on a vibration plate for several minutes. This vibration plate, you can find this in rehab centers, so the thought, and it's still debated, and this is another reason why we're looking at it, that when you stand on this vibration plate, afterwards, you're supposed to have developed muscle stiffness, and it's supposed to lead to more effective rehabilitation with the subsequent equipment that you're using during rehab. And this is a video of the plate running, and you can see the calf muscles as they tense up on the plate. We have the subjects on the plate for 5 minutes, and the first minute you're standing on, it's like, okay, this is good. This feels all right, and it kind of relaxes the muscle for a moment. But as you stand on here and you're trying to maintain your posture on the vibrating plate, at least for myself, quickly I develop a cramp on the plate, and I could not wait for the 5 minutes to be done. So a large part of the work in the study was to determine how to consistently apply the probe to the same location and with little pressure. The probe, it's aligned to the muscle and marked with reference to this holder that we have. And then the foot position on the force plate is fixed using a laser and marked on the skin at the medial malleolus. The leg position is also marked and fixed from above, so really your whole foot and leg is fixed into place. The ultrasound image at right shows a graphical readout of the elastography measurement. So it's showing you a color depiction with red being greater muscle stiffness. And in this particular image, this is the gastrocnemius muscle up above and the soleus muscle beneath it. And you can see that there's some dropout of blue in the middle, and that's actually where an artery was located, which was something that we had observed. This slide shows an example of the results for a single test subject. So in this example, the subject demonstrated a decrease in force generation with muscle after 5 minutes of standing on the plates. So the blue data points are the pre-vibration stiffness, and then the orange is the post-vibration stiffness. And we do this at different maximal contraction strengths of muscle. So there's an actual readout in front of them where they can see how much force they're imparting onto the dynamometer, and they can hold a position at a particular percentile force in order for us to get these readings. And we take multiple readings at each contraction strength to get these graphs. Okay. So the final results of the larger data set, there was another student who came in this past fall after me who continued with this work, and I had helped out and consulted with them on how to set the experiment up. That was the basic idea for me, is to pilot the use of the equipment and see the utility of it and what needed to be done in terms of the setup in order to make it work for the experiment. So far, what Dr. Rittberger has updated me on is that we haven't seen a significant effect of muscle vibration on muscle force, but further analysis is pending. Okay, also at DLR, they do have a flight medicine clinic. It's located within the Aerospace Medicine Institute building that I showed you earlier. It does serve pilots and ESA astronauts. They do both annual exams there, and they also do exams for astronaut selection as well for ESA. They have a fairly comprehensive suite of clinical capabilities. They have pulmonary function testing, cardiac stress testing as well, and a cycloergometer, laboratory evaluations, and the director is an ophthalmologist, Dr. Stern, and she does extensive ophthalmologic investigation. She has many different ophthalmologic imaging capabilities at the Institute. So now I want to move on and talk a little bit about NVHAB. This is a multi-purpose research lab with the ability to control the physical environment. It has research capabilities in chamber studies. It has a short arm centrifuge, MRI, PET studies, and bed rest studies. And it's also now the direct return facility for ESA. And they set up a room for the astronauts to stay after they come down from station. So at left is one of the main doors to the physiologic chamber. This is where temperature, pressure, and oxygen and CO2 content can be regulated closely. The picture at right shows the rooms that can be used for patient tests or also patient quarters and overnight studies in hypoxic conditions. At the end of the hall is the hypobaric chamber. and it opens up into a single large room that can be then sealed off from the rest of the hallway. So hypoxic conditions before the large door, after the large door, it can be hypoxic conditions and hypobaric. This picture doesn't necessarily really serve the room justice, but this is the hypobaric chamber, and it's quite large. It's about the size of, a very large living room, and it affords the ability to be able to have a whole group doing various activities within the hypobaric chamber while analyses can be performed and studies can be performed. This is the MRI PET machine, also right within the facility. The ring that you see on the MRI bed is a magnetic coil for analysis of bone and muscle. There's also a force plate. It's seen just distal to the coil. It's kind of a little bit difficult to see that's in there, but I had gone in one day and helped them just take a look at this magnetic coil. I was one of the subjects, and I was just doing some work on the foot plate so that they could see how well they were capturing images. And then also one of the neat things while I was there is that there were several experiments that were active at the DLR and at NVHAB. And so I saw two different studies. This second study is a hypoxia cardiac function study. The University of Texas had done a study looking at mice in the recovery from MI and had found that in hypoxic conditions, it might aid in the recovery. And so this was a follow-on study to that. So they wanted to look at human cardiac function. So to do this, they had elite climbers, Ralph, I'm going to not say his name correctly, but Dojmovitz and Nancy Hansen. They took part in this month-long study to look at hypoxic effects on cardiac function. The percent oxygen in the chamber was reduced from 21% to 8%, and they do this by flushing in nitrogen to give an equivalent altitude of 7,000 meters for at least 2 of the 4 weeks of this study. And then I'm going to show you this video here, and it just kind of gives you a sense for the types of analyses that they can do within the chamber itself and the types of activities that this large room allows them to do in terms of hypoxia. There was no pressure drop in this scenario. This is just reducing the oxygen content in the room to produce a relative altitude. And let's play this here. Okay, so this is Ralph. They installed a mobile climbing gym they could use. Yeah, they're doing some exercises. This is all at altitude, so to speak. Doing some blood draws. You can see they're wearing oxygen masks themselves. They're not affected by the altitude. There's heart ultrasound. This is brain MRI, and then you're going to see a heart MRI here. And so they could measure flow and stroke volume. You see climbing on the wall. And then here they are giving consultation during the study and talking about some of the results so far. They also do pulmonary function tests. And yeah. Okay. They also do bed rest studies. This is just one article, just as a sampling. Space Scott study with varied head down tilt and CO2 levels and looked at cognitive performance. And then the short arm centrifuge. The short arm centrifuge can be used with payloads or is also human rated. It has 4 different arms to it, so you can have up to 4 subjects on the centrifuge at a time. The centrifuge can go from 0 Gs to 6 Gs in 30 seconds. It also has, you can do ultrasound on the equipment while it's running, and subjects or payloads can slide on each arm during operation. There's actually a large study that's about to start up this year with an artificial gravity study. Both NASA, DLR, ESA have experiments that they're going to be running during this study So they're going to be doing 60 days of head down tilt with artificial gravity. And you can see that they're doing varied studies here, looking at plasticity of the hippocampus. Dr. Bouchard, locally, he's doing studies of cerebral effects of the centrifugation and head down tilt. And then Scott Smith here from NASA is doing some metabolomics, proteomics, metabolomics studies. Just to give you guys just a little bit of a picture of life in Cologne. On the left is the Dom Cathedral, which you can see from many parts of the city. It's one of the tallest cathedrals around in Europe. I think it's the second tallest church actually second tallest in terms of the comparison of height to width of the church. It's really impressive inside. On the right here, me with my family, with my wife and 2 kids, we're standing here in Old Town, which is right by the river. And then at left, I'm standing beneath the street sign of where my grandparents and aunt used to live. And there's another shot of the Dom Cathedral again. And then here we are, we're out with some colleagues. So to the right of myself is Mike Green. He was an ESA intern from Canada for the summer. He's an emergency medicine physician. And then some of you may know Lindsay Shepard. She's a NASA biomedical engineer, and she was working at ESA for the summer and past that amount of time as well, actually. Okay, so then Dr. Rittberger helped me reach out to ESA, and I went over to ESA to spend some time learning about their facilities and the activities that they do with the space medicine group there. First, just an overview. Here are the ESA participating countries. The member states are in dark gray and cooperating states in mid gray. So those are countries that basically, Canada actually sits on the council with ESA, but then these other countries don't sit on the council, but still have collaborations with ESA if they're in the lighter graded shade, if they're in the lighter shaded gray color. This is me arriving at the EAC, and Dr. Castrucci, Italian ESA flight surgeon, helped show me around and arrange my day there. So the EAC facilities, they're similar to training facilities available at JSC. One notable exception, EAC does not have a vacuum chamber for astronaut training, but other than that, you can see here that they've got vehicle mock-ups, payload science, experiment training rooms. They have a neutral buoyancy facility. They have a communication control center to talk to the mission control centers for ISS, a strength and conditioning room, and they have a clinic room as well. Similar to JSC, KBR Wiley also currently provides support to ESA. They have a flight surgeon there through KBR Wiley, biomedical engineer, flight controllers, exercise and physiotherapy specialists. Both these teams work with ESA astronauts, pre-flight, in-flight, and after-flight for rehab with the exercise physiotherapists. They have medical project engineers and scientists that look at examine new technologies and processes to support human spaceflight, and then medical education experts. They collaborate education outreach activities, which includes collaborations with other universities as well. So here's the vehicle mock-up portion of the building. They've got a Columbus module. They have a mirror mock-up that you can see on the right. They also have the HTLV cargo capsule that was used to deliver cargo to ISS. Here's a shot of the Columbus module, both from the outside and inside. And then this here is just to give a flavor for some of the payload and science training. You can see both NASA and ESA astronauts here getting training. There's Serena on the bottom left. Luca Parmitano and Alexander Gerst. So this is the neutral buoyancy facility, the NBF. It's 33 feet deep and 70 by 50 feet in surface area. The simulated Columbus module you can see sits on the pool deck in the image at right. The difference, one of the main differences between the neutral buoyancy facility versus the NBL is that you can see that this is Luca Parmitano in the pool, and you can see that he is actually has an oxygen tank on the back here. Let's see, right here. So the suit is not a pressure chamber, so it's just a suit for wearing in terms of ergonomics. But then they get their gas exchanges just as you would in scuba diving. And then this is a different setup here. They're doing a lunar surface simulation. Again, this suit, although it looks like a enclosed EVA suit, you can see the bubbles that are rising from the suit. So it's not an enclosed suit. This is a snapshot of the medical control room, the communication center that they have. This allows them to communicate with ground control for ESA near Munich and with Houston as needed. And then this image here, this is an artist's rendition of the lunar facility sitting next to NVHAB. This is something that they have the plans in place to build this out. They are going to have simulated lunar soil, and then they're planning to have a moon habitat as well called FlexHab, or Future Lunar Exploration Habitat. Future collaboration. Personally, there may be opportunity for me to assist with the elastography paper from the studies that had been done both in the summer and in the fall. At ASMA coming up this spring, one of the co-authors that I have on an omics genomics presentation is from ESA that I had met there and started to collaborate with. In terms of for the community, there are many opportunities to seek out working with DLR and ESA. Certainly research at the DLR and NVHAB, there's quite an extensive amount of opportunities with the advanced facilities that they have there. And ESA is also open to possible resident exchanges in the future. So that's the end of my talk here, and I'll open it up to you for questions. Thank you so much to NASA, UTMB, DLR, ESA, KBR Wiley, and Trish for making this rotation possible.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. Clearly, there's a lot going on at DLR and ESA, so we will appreciate the information. At this point, I'd like to open up questions to our offsite facilities, if offsite participants do have any questions from offsite. Okay, if we have no questions from the offsite facilities, I'm going to go ahead and open up questions to the room here. Stand by just one moment.
Thank you for the presentation. So I have visited for the NBHAB last years and found the NBHAB is used for the rehabilitation and also BDC for the astronauts. And I found that today it's also used for the research at the same time. So during the period of the rehabilitation after the landing, are there any restriction for the using this facility, such as when the astronaut is training or rehab, they are not used, such as not allowed to use some items which have a vibration or something. Do you know about it?
Yeah, so there is a detailed plan that they have for how they do their rehabilitation. I'd run across it just the other day. Um, I'm not certain. I could probably find that document again for you, but I don't know the particular details of how their rehabilitation differs from ours, for example, here at NASA JSC. Dr. Barrett?
Yeah, really appreciate it. How busy was NVHab? You showed a couple of things, but it's a sprawling facility. Was it really busy? Were all the capabilities being used to the best you could tell?
No, not all the time. So the short arm centrifuge, I don't believe was being used at the time that I was there for that month, for example. The hypoxic chamber was used one time during the time that I was there, and that was for a 2-day study. And then they did have an active bed rest study that was going on at the time, and so they were in separate quarters, but they were constantly doing MRI with those individuals for their analyses, and then the climbers came back for their post-run analysis, and I saw them do the cardiac function assessments with MRI and doing ultrasounds. So there's a smattering of activities at any given time that are going on at DLR, but from what I saw, not all the resources are being used at once.
And those guys can work with China. We can't. Was there any Chinese presence there?
No Chinese presence there at the time that I was there. But yeah, as you mentioned, the ESA team has been training with the Chinese and doing water survival training and all sorts of different activities to potentially go to their space station once it's developed and installed.
Last question, sort of like your summer camp experience. So what did you take away from there? How do they do things differently? What did it do to expand your outlook a little bit?
Sure. One of the things that they seem to do differently is that, to me, it seems like the researchers look at their work as especially at the DLR, they look at their work as more directly benefiting terrestrial applications. Like, it seems like it's more, they more readily will take on projects that don't have as a direct of a connection to an active space study. And that has, benefits and potential drawbacks as well, but it seems like it makes for an open research collaboration between the local community, what they need for the country in terms of technological and advancement, and then they can feed that back into studies from what they learn from that technology, from those efforts and so forth. So that was one of the big things that I seemed to pick up on.
That was an awesome opportunity for you and a great presentation. Thanks for giving that to us. Kind of a follow-up to that question is, I was wondering if you talked to any of your investigators about how easy funding was, or what's the funding flow for them, especially since it might seem to be more applicable directly.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So they write NASA grants as well and get NASA grants to do studies. As far as NVHab goes, they have local funds through the government of Germany and so forth, as well as they have university partners that they collaborate with as well. One of the NVHab experiments that I saw was with the University of Dusseldorf, which is just to the north of Cologne. And then ESA is unique because it's a conglomeration of multiple countries. And so ESA has 10% of the ISS contribution, and so they get 10% time on ISS and so forth. So a lot of what they need to do is through the parent organizations, whether it be NASA or working with another space agency to get their funding and time with different space activities and research.
Great talk, Chris. Thanks. You mentioned possible resident exchanges. Do they have an aerospace medicine residency program? Or is there one over in Europe?
Yeah, they have at King's College in England, there is an aerospace medicine diploma program that's actually run by Dr. Gradwell. And so that's, I don't fully understand whether that is, it doesn't sound like it's an actual aerospace medicine residency. It's a 1-year program with an option to include occupational medicine training as well. And the way that their physician training works is a little different over there. Like in Germany, you can go through and do physician training, but then not do a kind of like a PhD project. So then you wouldn't have an MD at the end of your name if you don't complete that project. Not sure if what the differences are in England, but there aren't any formal aerospace medicine training programs that I'm aware of within Europe and ESA.
Any resident or roughly equivalent presence at ESA?
Yeah, so they have physicians who are doing space medicine research at DLR, and a lot of them from the universities who are coming in collaboration are physicians who are coming in and running these studies. And then ESA does have an active intern summer program, so there are a good handful of ESA interns that are there working at the EAC, but they don't necessarily have, a lot of them are engineers. They're just now starting to try to do more outreach with physicians at EAC, and just this past fall, they had a 2-day conference they had about 30 or so physicians that came in, and they gave them a quick overview of space medicine. And next year they plan to, the only thing that the feedback was that they loved it. They just wanted more time there. So I expect over time, you'll see more and more of a residency, aerospace medicine residency program and in other types of activities and rotations for ESA being developed.
Great talk, Chris. Thank you for that. Question was, while you were there, there was an ESA astronaut on ISS. What level of insight did you get in kind of their concept of operations, how they support an on-orbit astronaut? And what did you take away from that? And anything you can feedback to us?
Yeah, it was similar in the way that they had their regularly scheduled PMCs that they would go up into the control center to take the call and confer with the astronaut. Other than that, I didn't get too much exposure into the daily activities that they were doing with Alexander Gerst at the time. What else can I mention about that? Let's see. I saw both. I did meet with Sergey, and Maybrit was there briefly, but she was also doing some clinical work as well at the time that I was there. So I'm not sure how else to really provide further insight, since I didn't exclusively shadow with them. But the flow seemed to be very similar to what we do. They don't sit in a mission control center. They're sitting in their offices, and they will attend to issues as they arise from the office. And then if they need to, it's just walking right upstairs, and they'll be in the control center where they can talk to their flight participant.
Yeah, just a little bit on the residency over there. There is a new aerospace medicine residency at University College London. So it's a full-fledged aerospace medicine residency with 1 or 2 souls a year. Ironically, the first one through it is now at Wright-Patterson for a year.
Okay.
Working. But it shows you kind of the exchange, and there will be tighter ties between UCL and King's College, And there's also a new program at the University of Exeter, which is more extreme medicine with a large aerospace component to it. So it's no coincidence all three of these little buttons are in the UK, and as much as possible trying to make those opportunities available for Europe. And I would say that from a research standpoint, EAC is probably a little stronger yet, so they're more research than aerospace medicine per se. Maybe a question for Dr. Powers, though. Working some exchange between those programs and UTMB, is there any thoughts and plans? I know you met with Professor Fong about that at some point.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're keenly aware and interested in interacting with the other programs. As a matter of fact, it's one of our high priorities, so it's in progress. So hopefully we'll be able to have them over here and vice versa.
All right. So when I was asked actually to write a space medicine chapter for a UK-based book, and the answer was no, get a young Brit to do it or a young ESA person to do it. And so Maybrit is actually taking lead authorship on that. And I would just encourage everyone that, we're trying to build an international community with a common understanding, and you've taken a really big step into that. And keeping ties with these guys, there's a few things they do better than us. A lot of things we do better than them, but the better our common understanding is, the better for everyone. So I applaud your effort.
Do we have any more questions in the room? Sure. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, that was an excellent presentation. I spent with the BHP team a week in Cologne in November. So we had our meetings at the ESA, the astronaut facility, and like you, I found it fascinating. One of the things I was wondering, when you received a tour of the NVHAB, did they show you the room which becomes the living quarters for the returned ESA astronauts, where they and their families can stay?
Yes, yeah, I did see that.
Oh, what I was going to mention was they toured us. We received that tour as well, and I was wondering what you thought of it based on what, and then I'll give you my impression.
That's good. So it's interesting that room. One of the large living areas that they use for direct return is the room that we were doing our study work out of. And so for example, when we were doing the study with the Dusseldorf, they did the monitoring of the chamber on a desktop that was in that room. So to me, I felt at home because it was a lot like a engineering kind of lab kind of feel. And so that's what I picked up on. But then when they have direct return, then they'll dress it up with linens over the tabletops, and so they dress it up a little bit. But it's not like they're in like a house apartment environment. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're getting towards.
Yeah, we were struck by at least the rooms they showed us were obviously they didn't have any homey feel to them. They said that they would bring in furniture and some couches and put in a television, but it was a very sterile environment, like a laboratory, and had a very odd, bright greenish, yellowish color. You noticed that too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so very different than our own astronaut crew quarters at NJSC, which is more, obviously has a very comfortable home-like environment. So I haven't spoken to any of the ESA astronauts what their opinion is of that, but it struck us, our group, as being somewhat sterile and laboratory-like. So that was just, I was wondering what you thought, and so you obviously saw the same thing.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Great presentation. I have a basic question that from your point of view, how was the collaboration between the flight surgeon in ESA and the research team? I want to know how much the flight surgeon is collaborating with the
research
team.
So I didn't observe the flight surgeons doing research at NVHAB, for example. They were also, it was also a period of time when they were they had a flight participant as well. So maybe at a different time, things might have been a little different from that perspective. There are engineering activities that are going on, and space medicine and space medical support activities that are going on at EAC itself. Not in terms of the flight surgeons from ESA, but for example, I know that they're looking at doing some virtual reality, and they were helping to look at what the lunar lab was going to look at once it was developed. And I know that Christopher Reddy was working with some of the engineers and collaborating from that perspective. So I would kind of see that the same kind of similar thing would happen, where the flight surgeons would readily be able to get involved with any explorations or science or research that's going on at EAC, but I just didn't see it at this time, and I think maybe it's probably because they were on a mission at the time.
For the talk, Chris. I'm just curious, how many flight surgeons were there, and what were some of their background specialties or training that they had to go through to get there?
Yeah, so it's quite varied, because they've got Sergi Vicker, he's from Spain, emergency medicine physician. Maybrit is also an emergency medicine physician from the Netherlands. There is Dr. Verts is the lead physician for the ESA group. He's from Belgium, and he's been in space medicine for a long time. And then they have Dr. Castrucci from Italy, who's also been in the program for quite some time as well. And Dr. Castrucci, do you recall what his background is? Is it emergency or?
I don't remember. Mike, do you remember what his background is? Yeah.
Family or internal? Yeah. So there's a similar mix from that perspective. I think one of the there was one French flight surgeon, and he had spent some time down at, I believe it's Concordia Station down in Antarctica. I think he was there for a year, and now he's one of the flight surgeons there. So that's a little unique. So those are the different backgrounds of the flight surgeons that are there. Mm-hmm.
Any more questions from our site? Okay, well, Dr. Haas, thanks so much for the presentation today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience for the participation. And we look forward to seeing you next month at our next Grand Rounds. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.